Thank you for being here. Congratulations on the nomination, and you're here on Constitution Day.
Yes.
I mean, quite an honor. I do want to ask you, in that vein, the preamble of the Constitution states that, says we the people. The Second Amendment grants the right to keep and bear arms to the people. The 10th Amendment sets aside rights for the people. Section 2, Article 1 says the people choose their members of the House. Who are the people?
Well, Senator.
Patriots, listen up. This one is big. On Constitution Day, a Senate hearing asked one of the most fundamental questions in America's history. Who are the people? And folks, if that question doesn't shake you to your core, then you're not paying attention. Because if we lose sight of who the people are, we lose our Constitution. Period. Before I dive into this, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe if you love freedom, and share this video with every red-blooded American you know. Because the fight for liberty isn't on the sidelines. It's right here, right now.
Well, Senator, this is obviously a subject of much litigation right now, particularly under the Second Amendment. And so I need to proceed with a bit of caution given the judicial canons. But, there are arguments out there that the meaning of the people was not necessarily exactly the same amendment by amendment and provision by provision. And that, there might be some contextual analysis that needs to be done to divine the precise scope of each of those constitutional rights.
Yeah, it's been interpreted differently for public education versus maybe the Second Amendment. How do you wrestle with that as relates to sort of the privilege and immunities clause that guarantees rights to citizens? How do you? And what I'm getting at is, are illegal aliens part of the people?
Well, the privileges or immunities clause of the 14th Amendment, when you read it, it certainly sounds like it would do quite a lot. But since the Supreme Court's decision in the slaughterhouse cases, it has not had a ton of weight to pull in, constitutional litigation. And instead, the Supreme Court has, viewed the due process clause as the lens through which many substantive rights are incorporated against the states and applied to the people. In terms of, the protections that illegal aliens have under different provisions of the Constitution, again, it's an issue under active consideration in the courts, so the canons prevent me from getting into it too much. The general parameters of the analysis would be to, look at the text of the constitutional provision in question, look at the history of its application. So, for example, the history of the application of the Second Amendment might differ from the history of the application of the Fourth Amendment, and then understand the constitutional text in light of that history.
Yeah, my guess is you might have some of these cases coming before you as they'll be litigated. In the time that I have remaining, I want to ask you about a couple of other things that you've done a very good job of addressing all the legal questions. What role, in your view, does common sense play in your jurisprudence?
I'm from Wisconsin, and so I embrace common sense. I think, for me, I think it's fair to say I'm a textualist and an originalist, but I do have some common sense guardrails in me, by which I mean, when you get to the end of your work, it's important just to pick your head up and look around and make sure that you haven't, lost the forest for the trees or been staring at the same 5 words of a statute for so long that, you've forgotten what else is out there in the world. And, talk it through with your colleagues and your law clerks in a sort of common sense way. Now, I don't think that means, any judge's personal common sense should trump the law that this body has enacted. It definitely should not. But I do think that, it's important for judges not to totally lose the forest for the trees.
During my time, the job I had before this as Missouri Attorney General, I learned through some, pretty contested litigation, I think, some of the important character traits that public officials should have, or through this kind of forging process that you go through that matter. As a federal judge, you're going to be confronted with a lot of difficult cases that have a lot of implications and consequences, and the chattering classes will be talking a lot, and you still have a life outside of, I hope, outside of your role on the bench. And I guess what I'm getting at, and I actually think this question is perhaps the most important question, at least that I can ask, especially in the times in which we're living in. of this really hyper politically charged environment, threats of violence. What, aside from your very commendable support for now Justice Kavanaugh and his confirmation hearings, can you give me an example of a time where you stood up for your beliefs and your convictions and risked really professional and personal backlash in making the right decision, even though you knew there was going to be a lot of heat in the kitchen?
Yes, Senator. I mentioned before that I led the appellate litigation team for 2 federal executions during the first Trump administration. And one of those executions was on January 14th, 2021, so it was 6 days before the transition. And at that point, the issue of continuing lawful federal executions became quite controversial in the department, and large parts of the department bowed out. But I did not, and I raised my hand to handle that work, and I did the work of not only the SG's office in that, but also the other divisions that had declined to participate. I don't think I left the office for several days. And I did so because, you know, a jury decades earlier had lawfully returned a verdict of death, and the victims in that horrific case had been waiting for decades for justice. But it was not easy personally or professionally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
So here's what went down. A senator straight up asked the nominee, who are the people when it comes to our Constitution? We're talking about the preamble, the Second Amendment, the 10th Amendment, all of them built on the foundation of we the people. And instead of giving a crystal clear answer, this nominee dances around it. Lawyer talk, case law, context matters. Folks, that's how rights get watered down. That's how freedom dies, when plain words suddenly need 10 layers of interpretation. And get this, when asked about illegal aliens being part of the people, the nominee plays it safe. Careful words, careful hedging. Let me tell you right now, illegal aliens are not the people of this country. Citizens are. Hardworking Americans are. The Constitution belongs to we the people of the United States, not people who broke our laws to sneak in. Period. Full stop. Now, I'll give some credit. The nominee called themselves a textualist and originalist. Good. But patriots, we've heard that song before, haven't we? What we need are judges who don't just say they'll follow the text, but who live it, breathe it, and fight for it. Judges who understand that the Second Amendment isn't up for debate, and that the rights our founders enshrined weren't meant to be handed out like candy to anyone who wanders across our border. And look, I respect that this nominee stood firm during the federal executions in 2021, even when the political winds were blowing hard. That took guts. But let's be clear, courage has to be consistent. You don't get to stand tall in one case and then wobble when it comes to defining the very heart of our Constitution. Patriots, this is the battleground. This is where the left wants to blur the lines of citizenship, erase the meaning of the people, and make our Constitution a free-for-all. We can't let it happen. If you believe that we the people means American citizens, our families, our communities, the people who built this nation, then drop a comment below. Tell me, do you think illegal aliens should be considered the people under our Constitution? Or do you stand with me in saying, hell no? This is our fight. Stand strong, stand proud, and remember, freedom is only one generation away from extinction. Let's not be the ones who lose it.